Welcome back. All right, I don't know if this qualifies as a madness board just with the sheer amount of writing, but all 32 teams are on the board, even Buffalo. Yes, even Buffalo. Buffalo's not made the playoffs since 2011, so not going to have a lot to say when it comes to Buffalo, other than it's too bad. So I've arranged teams according to wins in the playoffs from 2015, 2016 until now, in that the channel comes into existence 2015, 2016. So why not? Why not start there and look at recent history and see which teams have a really strong reputation in the playoffs, which ones don't, and all of that fun stuff, because it does get muddled rather quickly. So the team at the top of the board is Tampa Bay. They have a record of 72 and 43 from 2016 until now in the playoffs, a 626 points percentage, which is first amongst teams in the National Hockey League. During the regular season, a 642 points percentage, keeping in mind there's 3-point games during the regular season that we do not have in the playoffs. Now, they reached the Stanley Cup final in 2022. They didn't win that year. 2020 and 2021, they won Stanley Cups. 2019, of course, they lost in spectacular fashion against Columbus. What's interesting is, of course, now their reputation's tied to the whole being over the cap, yada, yada, yada. But in order for being over the cap to be something people get really mad about, you have to have a really good team. Tampa Bay's been a really good team throughout. Then we got Vegas sitting second, 54 and 34 record in the playoffs. The 614 points percentage is third. The 2023 Stanley Cup stands alongside the 2018 Stanley Cup final as the prouder moments in the Vegas Golden Knights history. The regular season points percentage, 626. That's fourth in the league. So this is where being near the top of the league means you do have a good chance of winning a Stanley Cup at some point. Of course, one thing that stands out with Vegas, maybe the most watched review I've ever done, the one for the Game 7 Round 1 matchup against San Jose. That was, of course, the major because of the Pavelski injury, and the NHL changed its rules after that. Because they realized that was the wrong call in the moment. And I know people still debate it. That's why that's such a popular video and such a popular topic. Now, Pittsburgh's third on the board because they won the Cup in 2016 and 2017. They're 44 and 38, which is sixth in points percentage at 537 since 2016. But that is greatly helped by those Stanley Cups. Their points percentage in the regular season, 614, which is fifth, and again that would include this season as well, at least up until now, which is March the 22nd. But they haven't had a series win since getting to the second round in 2018. This is a team that has struggled as a higher seed and eventually became a lower seed, and now they're not a playoff team. They weren't a playoff team last year either. So Pittsburgh likely to go into some kind of retool. I don't think there's an appetite for a rebuild as long as Crosby, Malkin, Letang are on the roster. Colorado is second in points percentage in the playoffs at 621, but they've only won 43 games, thus being beneath Pittsburgh. 26 losses, and of course they won the Stanley Cup in 2022. During the regular season of 590 points percentage, which is 13th, it's greatly dramatically lower. It's 2016-2017 they had that nightmare season, right? If you took that out, if you didn't count that, they'd have a much better standing. The one thing that stands out to me from 2016 until now is McKinnon's evolution. McKinnon's gone from, when the channel started out, being a number one draft pick that really hasn't hit his stride, to one that, yeah, he's really good in the regular season, but in the postseason. Then in the postseason, he's put up a ton of points, but they were getting knocked out in the second round, and so the conversation was still, well, they're not going to win with him in the lineup. They win the Cup in 2022, and now he's seen as the guy you might want to build your franchise around. That if you're starting a franchise from scratch, you might want to start with Nathan McKinnon, which is a topic that at some point in time I think I'll visit over the next little while, because I think that's kind of a fun topic as well. Dallas is 42 and 37, again since 2016. 532 points percentage is 8th. During the regular season, their 592 points percentage is 12th. They did reach the Stanley Cup final in the 2020 playoffs. That was, of course, the bubble playoffs, which, depending on who you ask, either nobody was really trying, which is weird because I watched those playoffs. They sure look like they were trying, or, well, they don't really count because bubble playoffs. So there's definitely that side of things. Or you could look at it and say, hey, Dallas had a really good run that year. No? All right. Anyways, for Dallas, this is a year where it looks like they're a contender. It's a three-way race between themselves, Colorado, and Winnipeg for that division spot. It just feels like with that more recent Stanley Cup win for Colorado, they're seen as the team that's probably the best team come playoff time, but it's going to be fun to see what happens there. St. Louis, a record of 40-41, so by points percentage, they're 15th at 494. During the regular season, their 597 points percentage puts them at 11th. But that 2019 Stanley Cup, that came from the Jordan Binnington eventually being put in the net situation. And it was interesting because Binnington got waived during that season and nobody picked him up. And then before you know it, he's a Stanley Cup champion. The argument could be made he should have won the Conn Smythe. I made that argument at the time. It went to Ryan O'Reilly, but that's fine. The first Stanley Cup went to St. Louis. It was fun to watch and share that with so many people who had gone through so much misery in St. Louis for so long. And that ended a joke that St. Louis wasn't allowed past the second round as well. Same joke that then was passed on to Colorado, and they got past that joke too. Boston, 39-41 in the playoffs over that time period. 488 points percentage is 16th. The fact that they have a 667 points percentage, which is first in the regular season, means that, I know I come across as being negative about Boston, but I've watched them not quite get over the hump in the playoffs often. The 2019 Stanley Cup final run was fun. They almost got it done, but St. Louis emerged victorious in Game 7. And so for Boston, they haven't won a Stanley Cup since 2011. I don't think this team's going to get her done either, but there's definitely a reputation there for Boston, even though I don't know if it's completely justified when you look at the numbers. Again, from 2016 until now, once you get into the playoffs, Boston usually finds a way to get knocked out in the first or second round. A lot of the time, Tampa Bay seems to be the problem. Then you got Washington, 37-37, which is a 500 record. I put them at 12th since they've won more games than the teams beneath them on the board here. 2018 Stanley Cup, that broke that curse. They couldn't get past the second round either. It was the butt of jokes for a long time. You can't win with Ovechkin. Ovechkin's never going to win a cup, and then he did. Their points percentage during the regular season is third at 634. So they've definitely had their struggles in the playoffs. And since that Stanley Cup win, they've had a lot of struggles in the playoffs, the same as Pittsburgh. But for Washington, they do have that Stanley Cup ring, and that's nice. It's 6 years ago now, but still, is it still kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling that they had that Stanley Cup in 2018 for Caps fans? It should be. For the Islanders, they're 35-31 in the playoffs, 9th in points percentage at 530. In terms of regular season, a 568 points percentage puts them at 17th. They are so dangerous as underdogs. The New York Islanders, if they find a way to cobble together a decent record the rest of the way and somehow get above that playoff line again, I don't know how many teams are going to be like, oh yeah, we want the Islanders. They're a nondescript bunch, but they can get hot at the right time. It's hard to figure out who you're going to shut down to really and truly shut down the Islanders, and then it might come down to Sorokin. If Sorokin can get his game together, if they get into that playoff run mode, then they would be very dangerous as underdogs yet again. Nashville, 33-36. Their 478 points percentage in the playoffs is 17th. During the regular season, their 600 point percentage is 9th. What's interesting is when they go to the Stanley Cup final in 2017, it's as underdogs. And then 2018, they were the favorites, but they ended up losing in the second round against Winnipeg. And of course, the 2017 final punctuated by Pekka Rinne's just too good right now. That was the meme that came out of that. It's been almost 7 years. That meme's kind of gone because, Rinne's retired, right? But it is something that comes to mind whenever I think about that 2017 Stanley Cup final run. And of course, that was the first year that I was really doing videos all the way through the playoffs every day. 2016, I did occasional videos here and there, and a video saying, congratulations to the Penguins on winning the Cup, but nothing anywhere near what I was doing in 2017. Then you've got the San Jose Sharks, 32-28. They were in that 2016 final against the Penguins and lost it. Their 533 points percentage in the playoffs is 7th over that time period. Their 499 points percentage in the regular season shows you that this team has really fallen off. They're 23rd overall over the period of time from 2016 until now. And I mean 15, 16 until now. And that's including some pretty good seasons at the start of that. They have not made the playoffs since the 2019 run. The 2019 run, I think, was really one that's cost San Jose, that made them think they were closer than they were, which is not uncommon in sports, but in the NHL it feels like it's relatively common. A team will go on a bit of a Cinderella run, and a general manager and maybe the fan base too will decide, hey, we're close. And they make moves thinking they're close, and then those moves don't pan out, and all of a sudden they may look foolish a year or two down the road. Carolina's 32-31 over this time, 508 points percentage, which is 11th overall. Their 612 points percentage, that's 7th in the NHL over that same time period. They've gotten swept twice in conference finals. The real key for Carolina, and you can see it at the deadline this year, scoring. They need more scoring come playoff time. That's where things have really dried up for them in the conference final. So adding guys like Gensel and Kuznetsov, and in Kuznetsov's case, he was a huge part of that run in 2018 for the Caps. It makes sense that they would make those additions, and we'll see what happens with Carolina come playoff time, but they're seen as one of the favorites. Florida, 22-25 in the playoffs over that time period, 468 points percentage is 18th overall. During the regular season, a 606 points percentage, which is 8th. Which Florida Panthers do we get this year? So in 2023, they went all the way to the final, and everybody was a genius looking back and forgetting that everybody took Boston to knock out Florida in the first round. But in 2022, they were President's Trophy winners who got knocked out of the playoffs in the second round. So which Florida Panthers do we get? Like, the fact that they're up near the top of the league, does that mean we may see them get knocked out early? And I know that may sound crazy, but it feels like when Florida are favorites and they're at or near the top. In 2016, for instance, they were division winners, and they ended up being out in the first round that year. So it will be really interesting to see which Florida Panthers we get in the playoffs. The Oilers, 22-27 is their overall record in the playoffs, a 449 points percentage, which is 20th. The regular season points percentage over that same time period, 573, which is 16th. They have struggled in the playoffs at times as favorites. This is a team that did go to the conference final in 2022, so there's still that recent success, but there are, like, the 2021 playoffs stand out as a huge error for the team. Last year, they couldn't get out of the second round. Vegas takes them down, so we'll see what happens this year. It does feel like, of the Canadian teams on the board, they might be the best chance for Canadian Stanley Cup, but we'll see. And then you got Toronto, 21-29 over that time period, a 420 points percentage. Insert laughter here. The playoffs start on that date as well, so yeah, get ready. They are 24th overall in terms of points percentage over that time period. 612 points percentage in the regular season is 6th. So Toronto's in this interesting position where it feels like their best chance to win might have already passed. Now, whether it has or it hasn't, it feels like it has. And so teams at times will win when people don't expect it. And there's definitely examples of that on the board. Nobody expected Washington. Nobody expected St. Louis. Tampa Bay, there were jokes made about them from 2019 all the way through until the start of the 2020 playoffs. Toronto has to win to make those jokes go away. They got out of the first round last year, but then they got manhandled by the Florida Panthers. It didn't help. So for me, I know last year, and I talked about this, how, it's if they get past Tampa, this could really help. But then they lost against Florida, a lower seed. So in the beginning, they were losing as a lower seed. Then they start losing as a higher seed. And of course, they had the 3-1 series lead on Montreal. And they lost that. So Toronto, I still think a lot of it's up here. A lot of it's psychological. I don't know how you fix that. Montreal, 20-18 is their record in the playoffs over that time period. 526 points percentage, which is 10th. They're dangerous in the playoffs, but in the regular season, they're 28th at a 485 points percentage. They did reach the final in 2021, and the happiness kind of ends there because Carey Price and Shea Weber, that was the last we saw them at the top of their game. Price has played a bit since then. Shea Weber has not. But never take Montreal lightly if they're in a playoff series. As an underdog, don't do that. As a Bruins fan, let me tell you, never take the Montreal Canadiens lightly in the playoffs. It doesn't generally end well. The New York Rangers, 20-27 over that same time period, 426 points percentage, which is 22nd overall. And their points percentage during the regular season, 589, which is 14th. Now, they did make the conference final in 2022. Then last year, they had a bit of a stumble there, so this year we'll see what happens. Igor's playing better, I think, than he did last year going into the playoffs. The New York Rangers are right there as a team that could win a Stanley Cup, and maybe this will be the year. But it's interesting because the Rangers have managed to stumble here and there too, but we don't hear as much about it as we hear about some of the other teams on the board. So we'll see if the Rangers can win their first cup since '94 this year. It has been 30 years. Man, long time. Winnipeg, 7, and I mean long time in that it's hard for me to think back and go, that was already 30 years ago. Anyways, Winnipeg, 17-23 is their record in the playoffs. 425 points percentage, which is 23rd on the board, so right beneath the Rangers. In the regular season, they're right beneath the Rangers too at 580, 15th overall. They did make it to the conference final in 2018. This team right now they've got put together, I think, is the best one they've had in Winnipeg. The problem is they're going to play either Dallas or Colorado in the first round. That's an issue. So while everybody points at the Atlantic and says, hey, this isn't fair, I don't know if it's fair for the Central Division right now, to be honest. Because if we went with just the conference setup, one of them would get the Kings, the other one would probably get the Oilers. Is that a better matchup? We'll see whether or not Winnipeg can get beyond the second round this year and get back to the conference final for the first time in 6 years. It definitely feels like this is a team that could, but you can make an argument for any of those three teams in the Central. Philadelphia is 14-14 for a .500 record, which is 13th overall in that time period. During the regular season, they're 20th at a .528 points percentage. And the question I have with them is, if they make the playoffs this year, and they could, they're still in a playoff spot, are they the next underdog that's going to go on a run? And I've seen people say, no, Philadelphia's not going to go on a run. But that's how that works. There are always teams we don't expect. Nobody expected the 2012 Kings to do anything. Nobody expected the 2017 Preds to do anything. So, and 2019, hardly anybody was taking the Blues to get out of the first round against Winnipeg. So the idea that, maybe the next underdog could be Philadelphia sounds crazy right now, but maybe it's not. I think it's really going to depend on how things turn out with the whole Couturier, Tortorella, that whole thing. And whether the team rallies or the team falls apart. But I do think that Philadelphia could be that next underdog to go on a run. Anaheim, 13-15 in the playoffs over that time period, 464 points percentage, 19th overall in the playoffs. In the regular season, they're 25th with a 496 points percentage. It's been a rough few years. And when the channel was starting out in 2016 and 2017, they just could not get over the hump. They had everything that they needed. They just could not get past. I don't know if they couldn't get past themselves, or maybe it was just the fact that other teams outplayed them. But yeah, Anaheim had their chances and just could not quite make it work. Columbus has been 13-18, again, over the existence of the channel. 419 points percentage for them, which is 25th in playoff numbers. They're 21st in regular season numbers at 514. The 2019 win over Tampa Bay, of course, is the one that we all remember. The 2020 upset of the Toronto Maple Leafs, to me, stands out as well. That was in the playoff round, or play-in round, of course. But since then, Columbus has had their struggles. I think that Columbus has been struggling to find an identity. I think they've struggled with trying to... I think Johnny Gaudreau was supposed to be that superstar to build around. It hasn't quite worked out that way. And so whoever takes over in Columbus, all the best to you. And then you got Minnesota right there, 12-27, a 308 points percentage, 29th overall in that time period. During the regular season, 598 points percentage, which is 10th. So 10th in points percentage, way better than the Islanders, better than the St. Louis Blues, but there hasn't been a round. There hasn't been a round that Minnesota's been able to win, including the play-in round against Vancouver back in 2020. So Minnesota is really, to me, one of the ultimate, really good regular season teams that can easily get overlooked because in the playoffs, they've fallen by the wayside. Last year's a good example of that. At points last year, looked like they could finish first in the division, and then they faded late. They went out in the first round. It's easy to forget, hey, they were one of the favorites late in the season. Ottawa, as we get to the third column here, 11-8. That's that one playoff run there, right? 579 points percentage. That's 5th overall amongst all the teams on the board. 470 points percentage during the regular season is 29th on the board. And was the 2017 run, was that a gift or a curse? Because, again, it feels like that told the team they were closer than they were. They made moves. They went out and got Matt Duchene. They clearly envisioned themselves as contenders. And it's been a lot of sadness and tears since then for Ottawa fans and for the players and people running it and everything else. And so, yeah, while Ottawa needs a new building, they also need to figure out what they're going to do to get back to the playoffs. It is not an easy easy role for Steve Staios at this point. I do think he can do it, but it's a matter of figuring out who you keep and who you lose. And obviously, they're not in the playoffs this year either. Calgary 11-20 over this time period. 355 points percentage is 26th amongst teams on the board. During the regular season of 562 points percentage, they're 18th. Calgary struggled as a higher seed. Twice, I think, they've won their division, and they haven't been able to do much with that. So for the Flames, they need to figure this out. This is a team that should be right in that Battle of Alberta with the Oilers. The Oilers found a way to turn it around. Calgary really did not figure that out over a long period, and now it looks like they're going to miss the playoffs again. Vancouver, 10-7, 588 points percentage. That's 4th overall. And this year, looks like they're going to be back in the playoffs for only the second time since 2015, which is not on the board. 2020 is, though. That's that 2020 run where they went 10-7, including the play-in round win against the Minnesota Wild. Then they knocked out St. Louis, the defending Stanley Cup champions, before running into Vegas. And even then, they gave Vegas everything they could handle. At least their goalies did. First Markstrom and then Demko. But during the regular season, Vancouver 507 points percentage. That's 22nd overall. For the Vancouver Canucks, this is a big one. If they lose in the first round, people will just shrug and say, oh, they had a good regular season, but couldn't do it when it mattered in the playoffs. So, oh well, I guess they overachieved. They're going to need to win in the playoffs, or else they're going to be labeled as an overachiever. Yeah, so there's a lot of pressure, I think, on Vancouver to win that first round. And right now it's trending towards them not having an easy first round matchup. Let's say the Oilers catch them and they end up against the Kings. I think that, honestly, that might be the best of the three matchups, because Nashville is just ridiculous. And Vegas is defending Stanley Cup champions. So I don't know that there's an easy path for the Vancouver Canucks right now. So we'll see. Seattle 7-7. They made the playoffs last year, of course. A 500 record puts them 14th on the board. The regular season number is 491. That's 26th on the board. It's only 3 years in, of course. They did upset the defending Stanley Cup champions last spring. So Seattle, a reputation as a team you don't want to face as an underdog. I would say there's probably some teams that are happy they've fallen out of the race right now. But as I mentioned earlier being just a few moments ago, I don't think either of the wildcard teams would be seen as pushovers by teams in the West. Then you got Chicago, 7-13. The last Stanley Cup, of course, was 2015. The timetable I used for this is 15-16. A 350 points percentage in the playoffs is 28th overall. Then in the regular season, they have a 486 points percentage, which is 27th overall. And it just feels like they were such a good team for so long that this is kind of the price you end up paying at some point, where your team will fall off. 2017, when Nashville knocked out Chicago, that was seen as a surprise. Should have been seen as a harbinger, as Chicago was not as good as their record, and Nashville figured out how to beat them. And then the following seasons, we would see Chicago fall further and further. And of course, now they're in the midst of a rebuild. New Jersey should have been adding playoff wins this year. They're not. 6-11 record from 2016 till now. 353 points percentage is 27th overall. Regular season, 497 points percentage. That's 24th. That's right around where it looks like they could end up finishing this year, unless they go on quite the run here. They looked good last year. They really did. And so I had every belief that this team was going to be great this year, and Stanley Cup, sure, why not? But that has not been the case. They have fallen off, and I don't know how you necessarily fix this if you're the New Jersey Devils. So I'll be very interested to see what they do. I think adding some experience on the blue line. I think they really miss Dougie Hamilton, but figuring out the goaltending, huge. And if that means keeping Jake Allen, because he's been quite good, I honestly would be fine with that. LA 6-16 in the playoffs from 2016 till now. 273 points percentage. Or 273, I guess, win percentage. That's 30th overall over that time. 550 points percentage in the regular season, because of course you have the 3-point games there, is 19th. So LA's gone through the rebuild. Now they're a good team. Now they have to get over the hump in the playoffs. Are they going to face the Oilers for the third straight year? Is that where we're headed? We're going to get the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers again. Can the Oilers beat them 3 straight times? It's not that easy to beat the same team over and over and over again. usually that team will figure out some way to defeat you one of those meetings. Then you got Arizona, 4-5. They've had playoffs back in 2020. 444 points percentage, that's 21st amongst the teams on the board. The regular season points percentage, 451, that's dead last, 32nd. 2020, they upset Nashville, and then they got taken out by the Avs, and of course that's bubble playoffs, so none of those were actually in Arizona. Then you got Detroit, they're 1-4, the 2016 playoff appearance being their last playoff appearance. That 200 points percentage, that's 31st amongst teams on the board. The 463 points percentage, 31st amongst teams on the board in the regular season. So yeah, for Detroit, it's been a lot of pain for a long while. Any kind of playoffs, I think Detroit fans will be happy. I mean, they'd be happy with a run, obviously, and getting out of the first round. But just being in the playoffs, I think would be huge for Detroit and for Yzerman and the Yzer plan. Because that's when free agents start saying, hey, they're kind of cooking something up in Detroit. Maybe I want to be a part of that. Then you got Buffalo. I have to mention Buffalo. The 0 winning percentage means they're 32nd. They haven't played a playoff game since 2011. The regular season numbers, 464 points percentage, that is 30th. It is no coincidence that San Jose and Buffalo have a hard time attracting fans, and they're at the bottom of the league. And in Buffalo's case, not at the bottom of the league right now, but not in the hunt for a playoff spot necessarily. And it does feel like the fans have kind of tuned them out. Buffalo needs to go on quite the regular season run, I think, and then the fans will return. But it is interesting to see how empty these buildings can get. And yeah, we'll see how everything turns out in Buffalo and San Jose long term. But for right now, they're rebuilders. Buffalo, again, not in the playoffs since 2011. I hope they get there soon. It'd be nice to see some playoff games with the Sabres and make up a little graphic with the Sabres logo for a playoff series. I think that'd be great. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. I just wanted to go through this because it feels like there's reputations teams have as to whether or not they're playoff warriors. And it's kind of weird because there are a couple of teams you can make that argument with. But it is a really unpredictable setup in that, your Stanley Cup champions or variety of teams, your Stanley Cup finalists, variety of teams. I think it makes it more entertaining. And this year, you can make an argument for a lot of teams as to who could win the Stanley Cup. And maybe I'll make myself a challenge that once we're down to knowing exactly who those 16 teams are, I can go ahead and say, here's how they would win and here's how they wouldn't, and do that for all 16 teams. But at any rate, that's for another day and another time. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.